All right, so to get started on our animal eye, we're first going to talk about our powers of observation. If we're trying to make realistic drawings, the more we look at the object we're trying to draw, the better we'll be able to draw it. And the first thing that we need to really observe is seeing space. We talked about the idea of positive and negative space, which is the main subject and the area around the subject. And we want to be able to see the positive and negative space both within the reference image, but also on our sketchbook page. So first, before we even start drawing anything, we want to observe the positive and negative space within the image and within our sketchbook. So the first thing we want to look at is the aspect ratio. If you have ever taken a photo on your phone and you've tried to crop it, you might have seen these numbers pop up, which are the aspect ratio options for cropping. This just is in reference to the size of the image if you were to print it. And an aspect ratio is just the ratio of the length to the width of the photograph. We don't need to understand too much about it. We just want to understand that they are different and that every time someone takes a photo, they might crop it in a different aspect ratio. So again, if we're looking at the length of the photograph versus the width, we can see this one, each one of these images are different. This one's kind of longer and skinnier. This one's a little wider. This one is pretty close to the one on the top. And this one's more like a square. So the first thing that we want to observe in terms of seeing space is the aspect ratio of our photograph. So then we can compare it to our sketchbook. Most sketchbooks are 8.5 by 11. If you have a sketchbook at home, you can look at the dimensions of yours, but most of them are 8.5 by 11. And that is closest to the 3 by 2 aspect ratio. That means for every 2 inches of height, we have 3 inches of width. So when you have selected your animal eye, first you want to kind of get an idea of how close to that aspect ratio your image is. If we look at this photograph that was turned in, this one, just kind of eyeballing it, does look pretty close to this 3 by 2 aspect ratio. If I move it over, I mean, I could, try and line it up like this and prove it to you. I could also do some measuring in Google Slides, but we don't need to do that. You can see that it's pretty close to that aspect ratio. So when I start to map it out in my sketchbook, I should pretty much be able to fill the page and all of the proportions would stay the same. However, if I look at this animal eye that was turned in from a different student, this aspect ratio does not look like the same as my sketchbook page. So that's going to present an issue for you to discover and to decide upon before you start drawing anything. If you try and stretch this out to fill the page, your eye is automatically going to be distorted. It would be stretched across the page and would not look right. So you have to start to envision how it's going to fit on your sketchbook page. Are you going to try and crop it? Are you going to try and enlarge it? That's the first thing that you need to notice and make a decision on as an artist. So I wanted to show you, for instance, an easy way to wrap your mind around what it's going to look like on your sketchbook page. I have made a portfolio for you so that you can upload your reference photo, and you'll also be uploading your work in progress as you're working on this project. And I automatically made this portfolio to be the same aspect ratio as your sketchbook pages. So if you look at the top on the ruler, it's 11 inches wide and it's 8.5 inches tall, which is the same measurements as your sketchbook page. All of the other Google Slides, the automatic template is this widescreen format, which is 10 by 6. So this will not look the same as your sketchbook. However, if you copy your reference photo onto your portfolio, then you can see exactly what it would look like on your sketchbook page. All right. Another thing I want to show you is guidelines. So on this portfolio, I've also already drawn a grid. So if you go up to view guides, show guides. Now we have a 1 by 1 inch grid that you can use to reference for your drawing as well. So I am going to show you a demonstration of how to use a grid for your drawing, which is another great way to improve your powers of observation over positive and negative space. I'll be showing that to you. So if you're going to try the grid method, or even if not, if you bring your reference photo onto this slide, and then you can increase or decrease the size of your photograph. And again, this is 11 inches, so we know that this is the size it would look like on our sketchbook page when we're drawing. So we'd have a little bit of a border around, and most of the space would be filled with that, with the drawing. If we go back to, let's say, this one has kind of a funky aspect ratio. It's long and skinny. So if I were to come here, and I can delete that picture and put this one on instead. So now if I start to try and fill my sketchbook page here, I end up with a lot of room at the bottom. So one thing you could do is you could crop the image. Right? I could bring this up so that it lines up exactly on one of the lines. Or I could even crop it so that it matches the aspect ratio. So remember, it was closest to 2 by 3. So if I go bring it up here, if I make it 6 inches tall, 2 by 3 would mean I need to make it 9 inches long. So I could crop it, get rid of some of this extra space on the side. And now I have a 2 by 3 image that I could then bring back, and that's a little more centered on my page. So that's something that you get to decide how you want to lay it out, how it's going to fit on your page. But this gives you an idea of what it should look like on your sketchbook paper, so that you're not trying to fit a square image on a 2 by 3 piece of paper. All right, so this will help you map it out. Also, if you line up your reference photo with these guidelines, then you can use the grid drawing technique that I'm going to show you in the next video. All right, so that's your first thing to consider as you observe and as you start to plan out how you're going to sketch your eye, is how is it going to fit on the sketchbook paper. So hopefully that is helpful and will give you a good place to start.